Good morning and welcome. If you're just joining us, this is your host, Keely Austin. Welcome to the Elevate Renatus team call. As of right now, we've got 61 participants. Make sure that you text your team. We do not want any ICMs left behind. Our goal for these calls is over 100 participants. Our trainer today is Christion Sadler. I'm so excited to hear what Christion has to share with us today. Before Renatus, as a young teen, Christion was troublesome and he was kicked out of class a lot. Once he got older, he was experiencing financial scarcity. He was at a daily wage job in steel fabrication. He heard about real estate and wealth as an opportunity for income. He attended different guru events. He felt like he wasn't really getting anywhere, and he found Renatus eventually. He started hanging around people he wanted to be like, and he was showing up early to meetings, leaving late after meetings, and helping out however he could. So he's very determined to be successful at this and to be very involved with this group, which is really smart, especially when you're first getting started. I recommend you get as involved as you can with your community. After Renatus, Christion has completed multiple transactions netting over 6 figures. He is a marketing leader, a President's Advisory Council in training, so a PIT team member, one of the founding members of Team Elevate. He's been in real estate business for over 13 years. He's always looking to add value, and I'm just very excited to hear what you've got to share. We're fortunate to hear from you today. Good morning, Christion.
Good morning, Keely. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing amazing. And thank you so much for everything that you do for this team. And starting off these calls, that's huge. I know that you get up every single morning and you start things off right, and you've got music going and quotes and, all the great stuff, videos starting off the call. So any of you that are getting on and you are getting on late to this call, I'm telling you, you are missing out, because you're missing out on those videos. The Generally Speaking, she always picks an amazing Generally Speaking, and then also the Money Matrix. And it's just a great way to start your day with some short messages that are relevant to you in your business, in your life. And Keely, I just want to thank you again for everything you do on these calls and for everything that you do for both the local and the national community, because I know that you do a ton behind the scenes and in front of the scenes as well. You're starting to train at different trainings, and it's exciting to see your growth. I remember, I believe it was the first time we met, and we were at the Dave and Buster's, and there was a great little interaction there, and you had just started in the business, and I've seen your mindset and your growth personally just skyrocket in such a short amount of time. So congratulations on that. I'm proud of you, and I'm excited to see where you're going.
Thank you so much, Christion.
All right. Welcome, everybody. The conversation that I wanted to have today, starting off, and then I want to open it up so that everybody has the opportunity to, kind of direct this call to what's going to work, best for you and what's going to assist you in moving forward in your business. So let me go ahead and do a screen share of the whiteboard just to have something up here. All right. So do me a favor, folks, make sure that you are either on mute, that you are on mute, and then also that you leave your videos off. I get distracted really easy, and it's just easier for me if all that is done by you and it doesn't have to be managed by me. So with that, folks, I want to talk to you guys about regionals. And I know it's regional season, and you just keep hearing all of these things, and people are saying, well, which regionals are you going to? And they're, talking about why regionals are important. And some of you might feel a little overloaded. And I want to kind of make sure that you are aware of a couple of things. And the first thing that you've got to be aware of is, what is your teachability index? So in order to be successful in life, you always have to keep your teachability index high. And there's a lot of people that they feel like they've learned something, and so therefore they don't keep their teachability index high. You meet these people. We call them the know-it-alls, right? Well, I read that book already. Okay, great. What have you implemented, right? What have you done with it? Oh, yeah, I've heard about regionals. Oh, I've been to regionals before. Oh, I've been to the Thursday night presentation. I don't need to be there. I should be up in study group, or I should be, I'm only going to stick around if my guest shows up. Folks, your teachability index, once you believe that you know something, that you just know everything there is to know about it, your teachability index is a 0. You basically have the opportunity to be anywhere from a 0 to a 10. And the moment that somebody starts saying something and your mind says, oh, I already know that, meaning I don't need to hear it, guess what? Your teachability index is a 0. And when you, combine two things, your teachability index and your willingness to accept change, when you combine those two things, that determines how much success you're going to have in your life. And so if when you are hearing about regionals, you're thinking to yourself, well, and there's a myriad of different things that you might be thinking, right? Oh, I don't need to hear that already. Oh, I've already registered. I don't need to listen to regionals. I know this because I'm already going. Oh, I've already been to a regionals. I don't need to hear about regionals. Well, again, you want to understand your teachability index is very, very low in that moment. And then the next thing to be aware of is, what is your ability to accept change? And I have to admit, in the beginning, my ability to accept change was pretty low, right? Even though I was, spending money on different courses and, trying to learn real estate investing, my ability to accept change, it was pretty low. It was on the low side. And what I realized is there was very few things that I was willing to make major changes that would interrupt my pattern of life. And it wasn't until I met this group, it wasn't until I met Bob Snyder and his previous company, this education in its infancy is where I started. And, in that company, I started realizing that in order for me to change my results, I had to change myself. And that was the biggest, let's call it, hurdle to overcome, because I had all these things already set in place. And I was young. You have to understand, I was 22 years old, but I had all these habits that had been set in place. Some of those habits had been set in place from, high school. So they'd gone back, years through high school. Some of those habits had been set in place after high school, working a, W-2 job. And bear with me, folks, while I plug my computer in so it doesn't die on us. And obviously, those habits that I had from high school and those habits that I had from working a W-2, the habits of living for the weekend, TGIF type mentality, where I would just kind of ho-hum through my day, and I wanted to pass the time, and Mondays were things that I dreaded. Guys, all of those things were habits that were keeping me in my failure zone. And so it was time for me to accept some change. And now, I won't harp on this topic too long, but now I'm addicted to change. I mean, if you guys saw each and every year how big of a complete lifestyle change that I make in my life, it's kind of crazy. I think the average person, if they did some of the things that I do to completely uproot my life and change the whole dynamic of the way that I'm living, they would go insane. But I've built up a tolerance to change over time, not just a tolerance, but an excitement for it. I mean, I am literally addicted to change at this point. I love change. I love to be able to adapt. I love to be able to be creative. And when you're in business, and especially in the real estate business, if you are not ready to accept change and you are not prepared for change, you will die in the market. I want to share with you guys. Back in 2008, and really it started for me in 2007 because I was in luxury homes, and that was the first market hit. There was a whole lot of people in the market that were unwilling to accept what was happening. And most of us in the beginning were that way. I resisted it way too long, and it cost me. I mean, it cost me, over $1 million in net worth. And I had to restart. I'm just lucky, or should I say, I'm just glad, I'm blessed that I had the education with Renatus, that I was able to shift and change and go back to strategies that would help me succeed in the new market. There's a whole bunch of investors that I knew back prior to 2008 that were thriving in the market, and now, over a decade later, are still working a W-2 job that they don't like. They're complaining about all the debts they have from way back when. Some of them, paid for the education, which back then was, was $20,000 as well. So many of them paid for the education. They put it on a loan of some sort, and they never did anything with real estate. And then they're complaining that they're still paying off their debts, from previously. And they contact me. They're like, "Oh, I want to do real estate now. How do I get involved?" The answer is, well, you get your education, right? And some of them bought education in a previous company and never did anything with that education. Their willingness to accept change is still very, very low. And they talk about how their spouses won't let them, do anything else when it comes to real estate. They just they just want to do a deal, but they're not current, they're not relevant, they're not willing to invest in themselves. I mean, if somebody's unwilling to invest in themselves, who in the heck would want them as a partner on a real estate deal? They're basically looking for somebody else to do the deal, and if things go wrong, they want whoever's doing the deal with them to take the brunt of that. That's not what investing is all about. So, getting back to my point, you've got to be highly teachable. Your teachability index, you want to keep that as high as you possibly can. So when you hear something, and if it is something that you feel like you know already, it's time to check in with yourself and say, okay, but what else could I know? But what else could I learn? Some of the most successful people that I know, I'm talking people that own multi-million dollar companies. They're always looking for just that one piece of information, right? They're willing to pick up a book. They're willing to, have a conversation. They're willing to attend an event to get just one piece of information that will help them level up. And so all of you on this line should be searching and seeking that one piece of information, that one way of hearing it that makes a difference for you. Because again, as you're learning and you're growing, the way you hear information changes as well. And you want to understand this. Think about a book. Think about a book that you read back in high school. Go reread that book today. See how differently it shows up, how many things you notice that you didn't notice before. Even better and more relevant to your life today is pick up Think and Grow Rich. Read Think and Grow Rich all the way through. And then when you're done and you've applied everything in that book, Read it again. What I've noticed is every time I read Think and Grow Rich, which I've been through at least a dozen times all the way through, like from start to finish, and way more than that, that I've started it, or I've read a part of it, or I've went to a portion of it, or I've, went all the way through it. I've been through that book many, many times, and still to this day, every time I go through it, something is different. I catch something that I didn't catch before. So, your teachability index must be very, very high. All right. The other thing is, if you hear things and it goes against your current way of thinking, this is the last thing I'm going to talk about with your teachability index. If it goes against your current way of thinking, guess what? You should be asking why. If it challenges you to the point where you have to reject it, that means your teachability index is very low. So instead, when you hear something and it sounds completely off the wall, what I want you to do is say, "Oh, that's interesting. Show me." And sometimes when you're saying "show me," you got to say it to yourself because you're hearing it in a book or you're hearing it on a training, and you can't necessarily, talk to that the person that's doing the training. Challenge it internally. Go do some research. Go look and start understanding somebody else's perspective. You'll be amazed at what that can do to your mind. It's been said that it takes the most brilliant of minds to be able to hold two opposing ideas simultaneously in your mind. So, let's get back to regionals. Folks, it is regional season, and this time of our business is when sales pick up. Historically, company-wide, and within all the leaders that I've ever known, including going all the way back to my, tenure in Bob's previous company, where my mentor at the time, and I call him a mentor because he really took me under his wing, he was making $1.7 million a year marketing the education. This last quarter of the year has always been the most profitable quarter of the year. And most people don't understand that. They think, oh my gosh, we're coming up to that time where there's just all of these holidays and there's all of these things in the way. And, a lot of people actually rest in their business. I've seen it. Every single year I've seen it. Where IMAs that were engaged start taking a lot more time off, start putting their focus somewhere else. And this is the most profitable time of our business. So if this is the most profitable time, it's time to double down your efforts. And one of the best ways to double down your efforts is to get new information, to get new perspectives on what's being done, to hear from people who are actually getting results. And we have coming up here in Utah a regionals where we have multiple top income earners. I'm talking about the top of the top, right? The guys that are making the most money. And they're going to come and they're going to share their perspective. If you got just one insight, if you got just one way of thinking about a subject that you hadn't been thinking about before, if you got one tool that you could add to your business that would suddenly put you on a new playing field, that would put you on a higher perspective, wouldn't it be worth it? Now, for some of you, you're on this line, and coming to Utah on this short notice, that's going to take some major change, right? You're going to have to, obviously pay the $150 to be there. You're probably going to have to, pay some travel costs. You're going to have to possibly, take off work, right? And that's going to cost you money. You're going to have to maybe, get a babysitter, for the kids. You're going to have to get somebody to watch the dog. You're going to have to, do all these things. And it might not make sense logically to do those. For some of you, you're saying, well, there's one coming up in my area. I don't need to worry about it. Again, I'll just emphasize, if you just get one piece of information that is going to take you to the next level in your life, isn't it worth it to accept that change, to go the extra mile? I mean, I've shared this story in the past where in my in the previous education company that Bob Snyder owned, I was a marketer there as well, and there was a time where I was really struggling in the beginning of my business, and in so doing, there was a regional training coming up, and this training was in Chicago, and I lived here in Utah, and I didn't have the money to go. Like, I just simply didn't have the money to go. I didn't have a clue how I was going to do it. And I was on one of these calls, and it was probably the 5th or 6th or 7th time that I had heard them talk about, you have to be at regionals. And I heard, different leaders talk about how this could put you a year ahead of if you don't go. And I heard other people's stories about those little insights that sometimes didn't even come from the training. They came from the conversation outside the training, during lunch, or after everything was all done, with an IMA from a different state, where they had this small conversation and they got this little insight, and it made the impact in their business. And when I heard these stories, when I heard them talking about it, finally it sunk in. Right? Because in my mind, I just saw no possibility. And what I found is the universe will usually provide what you decide. So if you decide that there's no possibility of you going, or that it just doesn't make sense for you to go, you're probably going to be right. But if you make the decision that, you know what, maybe there's something to what these guys are saying. And that's what I did. I said, you know what? Maybe there's something to what these guys are saying. I'm going to make the decision to go. Here's the interesting thing that you're going to learn. You first have to make the decision that you are going to do something before you will ever make the decision or figure out the how. So you have an opportunity, and this was the opportunity that I had. I made the decision. And I actually remembered a conversation when I was first looking at funding my education. And my enroller at the time said, you're never going to figure out the how until you make the decision that you are. So first make the decision. Are you going to do this? Are you completely committed to doing this? And that was a big, scary thing. I mean, spending $20,000 at 22 years old, when you maybe you own your house. I did, buy my house when I was, I think, 19, but I already had a second mortgage on that house. So I had done a debt consolidation loan, right? And I had taken out all my equity and basically paid down credit cards and paid off, all these different loans that I had. And then I was starting to rack back up these credit cards. So taking out that big $20,000 loan, that was scary to me. And so when I made the decision, I'm going to do this, all of a sudden I started seeing everything start lining up for me. Now, it wasn't like I sat back and watched it happen. Not at all. I got to work. I went out there and applied for things. I went out there and started having conversations about how I could find the money. And sure enough, universe aligned and right. Camera Lewis, you keep coming off of mute. All right. And when I made the decision that I was going to go to Chicago for this regionals way back when, it was the same thing. I didn't have the money. I had maxed everything out. I was pawning, things that I had. I didn't have anything left. And so I ended up applying for a credit card and I got approved for $300. And somehow I had to make $300 get me to Chicago and back. I had enough that I paid for my ticket, and then $300 had to get me to Chicago and back. So I ended up getting with a group of people that were driving out there, and I ended up rooming with another group of people. So basically, I took on and I said I will drive an extra portion of the drive for some of my cut in the gas money. And then I'm going to I'm going to sleep on the floor in somebody else's room in order to to basically save cost on the room. And it was at that event that I made a major shift in my mindset, in my belief, in my actions. And guess what? It showed up in my results. So I could go on and on about what regionals is, and I could talk to you, about all of the different things that you're going to be learning and the different people you're going to be hearing from. But folks, all of those little details aren't what matters. What matters is that there's an event with information from people who are getting results that can change your life. So you have to make the decision. Is it worth it to you to make whatever sacrifices necessary to get that information from those people so that you can succeed? It's really that simple. And yes, I will agree with what I heard way back when somebody said this event could put you a year ahead of if you don't go. Folks, do you really want to delay your business by a year? Now, I'm really proud of those people who are going to multiple regionals, because guess what? They're saying, I want to be even further ahead. And they know there's going to be certain portions of that training where they're going to be hearing the same information. And guess what? Repetition is the mother of all learning. It's the best thing they can do is not only hear the information, but repeat that information from those people who are relevant, who are making money, and get to hear it multiple times so that they can implement more effectively. So I want to ask you, what regionals are you going to? And the other thing that I want to do is I want to leave a little bit of time on this call for you guys where you can answer or ask me any questions that you desire. Doesn't have to be focused on today's conversation. Anything that you guys want to cover today, I've left us a little bit of time here. Go ahead and either chat those in or you can even come off mute. Ashley Nicole Rose, I am excited for you. You're flying in from Washington. That is awesome. We will welcome you with open arms. Joanne Smith went to Arizona and they're coming to Salt Lake City and they're going to Sacramento. Chicago, and it's her first one. Oh, Tamara, that's a long conversation, but essentially what came down to it was he had a business partner whose ethics did not line up with his, and really didn't line up with anybody who's, who would want to sustain a business. And so that's basically what happened there. I will say, um, and I don't think many people, talk about this very often, but, during that time with Bob's previous company and that transition, it was crazy. And, there was a lot of things that came out about Bob's previous partner that we just couldn't believe, the money that had been embezzled from Bob and the people that weren't getting paid and all those things. But that time was so crucial in cementing my belief in who Bob Snyder is as a person, as a man, because he funded out of his own pocket everybody's education, meaning he continued to host, excuse me, those live colleges, because that's what the education was back then, out of his own pocket. He used to fund those education until everybody who had paid for education was fulfilled. And then on top of that, he allowed many people to grandfather from that company into his brand new company, which there was no need for him to do that, right? He didn't have to give anything when he was launching something that was brand new, that was not associated with that previous company. But I mean, literally out of his own retirement, he funded to make sure everybody got what they paid for in the previous company, and gave a whole lot of benefits to those of us who went ahead and joined Renatus. All right, Belen, I'm having a really hard time staying focused and managing time wisely. If you experience the same thing, how were you able to overcome that? So here's what I've noticed is, this does come and go, by the way. It's you're not the only one. In fact, it happens to everybody. So staying focused and managing your time wisely. Here's the one thing that I would say is, in every moment you have a choice. You have a choice to decide what you're going to be doing. And for the most part, there's, one major activity that is going to bring you results. And that is having directed conversations about the business, right? Having conversations with people where you are asking them specific questions and making invitations for them to attend an event or get the information. Or if you're talking about the real estate side of the business, having directed conversations with homeowners, property owners about selling their property. And so usually getting back on track, staying focused and managing your time wisely comes down to just making one call. In any moment, just making one call. And then you'll find when you make the one call, it's easier to make the next call. And then it's easier to make the next call. And then it's easier to make the next call. And remember, in each and every one of those, all you're doing is you're just making one call. And so that means if you're working a job, you've got 15 minutes on your break, just make one call. And then when you get your lunch break, what are you going to do? You're going to make one call. And when you finish that call and you realize that you still have lunch break left, just make one call. And when you get home from work, just make one call. And what you'll find is if you do that, if you just focus on that next call, that one call, over time, you're going to build up a habit. And pretty soon you're going to start time blocking. And you're going to have long blocks of time where you stay focused on those money-making activities. And over time, you're going to realize that you've managed your time a lot more effectively, because as you make one call and one call and one call and one call and one call, pretty soon, guess what? It starts compounding, because now you're getting callbacks. Now you're getting people that have gone to an event that are calling you after the event. You're getting people that you didn't get a hold of the first time that are calling you back and wanting to talk about learning real estate investing. You're getting people that have been to multiple events and are wanting to figure out how to find their funding. And pretty soon, you kind of just force yourself. You force yourself to be a better manager of your time. So That would be my biggest piece of advice there, is start by making that next call, just that one call. A great book for this, by the way, is The Slight Edge. The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. Go read that and learn about those little simple things that you can do that'll make huge differences in your life. All right, 2 more minutes. 2 more minutes, and then I'm going to have to jump off here. Is there one final question that I can answer? Okay, we got 1 more minute. Last final question.
Hey, Christian.
Yes.
Hi, this is Jenna from the Denver team. I am curious with these investors that the value that they get out of this, but more so presenting it in such a way that they can see that.
So Jenna, unfortunately, you were cutting out throughout that whole talk, and I didn't hear most of what you said. Can you try one more time? Hello, Jenna, are you still there? Oh, darn. Well, I was hoping that I would be able to answer that for her. Hopefully she'll bring it to next week's call, and I appreciate all of you being on here. And by the way, I will be in Salt Lake City. So if you want to hear from me in a regionals, I'll be at the Salt Lake City Regionals. It's coming up a week from Friday. So we're right on the heels of it, and I would love to see you all there. Thanks, everybody.